Welcome to Foreigners and Friendship, a series of podcasts. We present a number of bonus tracks connected to our radio show. You can listen to conversations with artists and activists, reports from festivals and other larger events, essays, reviews, poetry, and letters. We see ourselves as part of a non-binary rebellion with the intention of creating a language and a human condition beyond race, ethnicity, gender, sex, and class. Tear down these walls, dismantle the statues of power, and meet the other with an open spirit. In the middle of January 2023, we traveled to Durban by the Indian Ocean in South Africa. Durban is a major port. As a matter of fact, it is the biggest port on the continent. Officially, Durban has been named to eThekwini municipality. In Zulu language, Iteku means port or harbor. In eThekwini, we meet the director of Durban Art Gallery for a conversation about contemporary art in South Africa. The conversation takes us in many directions and deals not only with art but also with the living conditions in South Africa, politics, and the status of art in general, and especially visual art in contemporary South Africa today. Only towards the end we return to what Durban Art Gallery is doing to bring art to local communities in the area around Durban or in eThekwini area. The conversation with Mduduzi Xakaza took place the 17th of January 2023.
I am Mduduzi Xakaza, director of the Durban Art Gallery under the eThekwini municipality.
Right now we are in your office.
Right now we are in my office in the Durban Art Gallery. I'm still on leave because of the festive season. I took long leave, but doesn't matter. Yeah, we are in this office, and the Durban Art Gallery is in the City Hall, which is on the second floor of the building. So the building is divided into administration and cultural blocks. So we are in the cultural block. On the first floor we have the museum, the Natural Museum, and on the ground floor we have a library.
And it's all funded by the municipality.
It is all
run by.
It is all funded and run by the eThekwini municipality. eThekwini is somehow another word which somehow replaces Durban, because eThekwini is supposed to show that now this is a metro. It's a metropolitan area which covers even rural areas under this municipality. So this eThekwini municipality is a combination of urban and rural areas. That's why now we are using eThekwini, which is a local native word for this place.
What does it mean? It's Zulu word or?
It's a Zulu word, eThekwini. There are many ideas around the meaning of this word, of this name. Some people believe that it's called eThekwini because of the port, because we are close to the port. So some people think that port in Zulu is called Itheku. But some people have other strange ideas which I don't support.
It has had that name always, or it was?
It has had this name since just after 1994, when we had these democratically run municipalities, and when we started having black mayors, etc. Our black mayor, the first one here, was Mayor Councillor Mlaba. So it was during his tenure that this municipality was named eThekwini. In fact, it used to be called Durban Council, City Council, Durban City Council. but now it is eThekwini municipality, no longer just Durban City Council.
And it is the same thing with the street, which is called Anton Lembe.
And the street,
because before it was called Smith Street.
It was called Smith Street. There has been quite a hectic process of renaming places and streets, not only in this city but around the country, across the country, to honor some people who were involved in the struggle for liberation, in the struggle for what we call democracy nowadays. Anton Lembede was once a president of the ANC Youth League. In the olden days, I mean, he lived long ago. So this street was named after him, like other streets, of course, like Florence Mkhize. It's a building, that one, Florence Mkhize.
Some of these renaming was in the beginning of the new South Africa. But I also have an impression that there's now, in 2023, there's a new kind of wave of renaming places. For example, Port Elizabeth is now Port Elizabeth.
Around the country, this process of renaming hasn't stopped. It's continuing.
Oh, it has been going on.
Yeah, around the country, because universities have been renamed as well, some universities. Some public spaces like halls, etc., have been renamed. Even the University of KwaZulu-Natal, this KwaZulu-Natal University, used to be Natal University. We used to have Natal University, but we used to have University of Durban Westville, which was mainly for Indian people. But we used to have other colleges of education. But at some point after 1994, all these were put together and called University of KwaZulu-Natal. Just different campuses. Yeah, this renaming, even though I don't see why, it doesn't change the living conditions of the people. So in my opinion, it is just a useless process.
It's not only something that you see in South Africa, it's something that's going on also in a lot of other places, especially if you change the power system.
So there's nothing unique about this renaming?
And also nowadays there's this renaming to respect kind of colonial history in some of the old colonial nations.
Yes.
The one I come from myself. And there's a discussion about this, and it's viewed as kind of...
But renaming itself, But renaming itself is very expensive. Many businesses should now change their letterheads, and also the streets, they must put all these signs, direction signs, and that is expensive. But it doesn't benefit the people who have been suffering during the era of apartheid. It doesn't change anything. It is just one of those symbolic things. And these symbolic things mean nothing to the men on the street. They just mean nothing, because whether the name has been changed or not, it doesn't matter, because his condition remains the same.
But maybe it's also the people who are already in some kind of power position that even recognize that or think it is important, maybe.
And also it's for those educated people who believe that names must change, this and that must change. But those are symbolic changes. Those changes don't mean anything. They are not real. They are just symbolic. Many people in this country still don't know these new names. Many people. It has been very useless, as far as I'm concerned.
But I appreciate the point of view, because it's actually also a discussion that I'm trying to follow in a lot of things I'm doing, because you're confronted with language. We also live in a world where people change the pronouns of how they call themselves or how they would like to be addressed. So there's a lot of symbolic work or linguistic work being done to try to change the world somehow.
For me, these changes look very cosmetic. They just appear on the surface. And then people say, there are changes now. But they are just cosmetic changes. They are just nothing.
Very different.
I mean, life is getting worse and worse, because, I mean, if you live in a country where there's so much corruption, where services don't change the lives of the masses, then it means that all these cosmetic changes are useless. They are very useless.
And maybe they also, I feel when I follow the public debate in South Africa, there's also kind of a tension because now it is 20-something years since apartheid was officially but maybe I would not call it anger, but maybe almost in parts of the population in connection to we were promised something or we thought we would have been somewhere else than we are now. And it creates kind of conflicts and also a discussion around ANC about what is the future of that government.
Yeah, that is so true because wherever I go, I hear people complaining about the ruling party, complaining about promises that have never been fulfilled. But actually, they are complaining because they are now comparing life now and life under the apartheid system. Life under the apartheid system was difficult because everyone was aware that being black was a problem. But the economy was running very well. And salaries were not bad.
The comparison is kind of an uneven comparison.
But anyway, one cannot even justify that system because it was unjustifiable. That system of apartheid. It was unjustifiable because of the brutality of the police towards black people. But the economy was being run properly and corruption was not visible. We cannot say there was no corruption, we don't know. But everyone knows that there is corruption in this country. We know that whenever there's a project that is said to have cost taxpayer 5 million, we know that it probably was never supposed to cost 5 million. It should have been maybe 1 million. So this inflation of costs and stuff like that simply means corruption. But also the other problem here is these different camps within the ruling party. And now everything has gone down to two main camps and smaller camps within each camp. Maybe if I can say that. This CR camp and then this RET camp, as they call them. Yeah, it is quite confusing and it is quite disappointing, if I can say that. It's quite disappointing. Very bad. I'm happy for people who are not following the news, not from the mainstream media, but news, real news, because the mainstream media will always distort everything. But I'm happy for those people who are not following real news, because when you follow real news, you know the connection between what's happening here and the global agenda. So whatever we see here is a reflection of the global agenda. So whenever we hear that, various state presidents are meeting in Davos, meeting under the World Economic Forum to discuss matters, we know that we don't benefit from those discussions. Only the elite will benefit from those discussions. But people who are not following these narratives are very happy because they don't know. Yeah. When you don't know, then you remain happy. Ignorance is bliss. Ignorance is bliss, but when you know what's happening and you keep on following what's happening, then you know you can't be happy.
Yeah, then it becomes very, very depressing because
you hardly fall asleep at night. You wake up feeling tired and you wake up without hope for a better future, because there will be no better future when the global elite do whatever they want to do around the world. When they treat people as mere merchandise, you can't be happy. But then there's a strong sense of denial. There are people who deny all these things. And they just say, that is just, those are just conspiracy theories. But we see these things happening right in front of our eyes. But people just want to bury their heads in the sand so that they don't see what's happening. But it's happening.
It is happening.
It is happening. It is happening.
Yeah, and somehow it gets more and more difficult to figure out what is, I mean, how can you fight some of these things? Because we used maybe to think we could organize ourselves, and then we would, like the ANC did.
It is very easy.
And then you can change the course of the world. But if you look in our time globally, then it becomes more and more difficult to figure out, does mass manifestations mean anything? Does labor union mean anything? Or does all these things mean anything? Or do they have any effect?
All these things don't mean anything anymore. Voting doesn't mean anything anymore because they can rig those votes. And they do that all the time. In fact, elections are not elections. They look like elections in the eyes of the masses, but they are selections. Those are selections. Because the elite...
different things were almost the same. So
because the elite is busy. I mean, the elite will always manipulate all these processes according to their set agenda. They will select and they will do what we call regime change. When this particular regime doesn't push their agenda, then they will create a narrative and say, we are going to attack that country because there is no democracy, because so-and-so is butchering his people. These are champions of democracy all over the world. And then after years, people learn that, no, that was not the reason. There was a certain reason. But then people always read this ordinary newspaper and then there's just watch TV, which is also controlled by the same cabal. There is a cabal, but people still don't understand.
Yeah, there's kind of an agreement often between journalism and official power and economical power. And
because
the journalist is not going to confront anything, because then this guy will not talk to me the next time or something. Or some kind of weird conspiracy idea about how the world works.
That is true.
So therefore, the media doesn't really have an effect in that way.
Yes, of course.
Part of it establishment.
It is a tool of the elite.
Yeah, and they have kind of common interest somehow, because it's you have this feeling that there's this common interest between different kind of power structures.
Because these things are controlled and manipulated. It is very clear now when we look at what is happening today. It is very clear that almost all of these plans were made long ago. They were made long ago, and people who made these plans have died. And those who followed after them are now fulfilling. Even if these old guys die before they fulfill whatever they are trying to do, it will still happen because those younger ones are still pushing the same agenda. I mean, when you look at all these emblems around us, you can see all those signs and emblems and this and that. You can see that this power is really ruling the world. It's very interesting.
There was also a point, I don't know how many people believe in that anymore, where we thought, especially if we came from the art and cultural sector, that art could kind of play a role in educating people about how the world works, and also in terms of changing the world somehow. Having an effect or using art as a political tool, not in a direct sense, but that art had some kind of
as a tool of informing the people, and also perhaps as a tool of resisting. I've heard that.
And now we are sitting here in an art museum. And how do you think about art's possibility of or which role are contemporary art today play?
No, I'll be very honest with you, Morten, because the way we think about art, we know that art should be used as a tool of communication between the artist and society.
Yeah.
But that is what artists try to do. They try to do that. But if they work against the global agenda, both of us know very well that they can be crushed. The kind of art that I see today is not easily accessible to the ordinary man on the street. It can be understood by the educated elite and those who are used to art, those who are visually literate. But for those who are not visually literate, it remains difficult to understand.
And something that I'm not going to deal with because I think it's weird.
Especially in these so-called third world countries. In the so-called third world countries, art itself is very elitist. That is the problem. So when we talk about society, we talk about society with the exclusion of people who are supposed not to be intellectually initiated.
So you mean that art has in some ways also removed itself from this public communication? Or,
definitely.
And then we are kind of centered in kind of, you would say, an academic circle where a few people
definitely.
And they also take the politics out of, or it takes the politics away from
the ordinary people. The challenge that we are dealing with in this country, I don't know how many people are dealing with it, because I often suspect that some people are just relaxed. They think everything is going very well, but there's a big challenge. The challenge is how do we bring art to the people? Not in a physical sense, but in an intellectual sense.
Yeah.
For example, during the apartheid years, the white government didn't encourage and didn't even fund art education to black people. So our schools were without art. There was no art in black schools, but there was gardening and something they called craft, because they claimed, well, blacks could not understand, create, or even appreciate art because they were not intellectually endowed to do that, to be able to do that. It was based on a racial stereotype, which was not true, of course.
But which also kind of separated craft and art from each other.
Yes.
That was part of the consequence, a separation.
That's it. This separation
where I come from know very well, where there's also a separation, but it's a general separation.
Yeah. You see, this separation between art and craft is very interesting because it is a problem that has never been resolved up to now. And I don't hear academics working on this problem. They are very quiet and they are just going on and on with whatever they are doing. So it is also interesting that we are supposed to be correcting the wrongs of the past, but we don't seem to be doing that. I think the problem that we are having nowadays is the problem of class in addition to the problem of race. Black people are not the same. Unfortunately, there are black people and there are other black people.
There's the black people
there is this otherness.
Became privileged somehow.
Yeah, there is this element of otherness which is very dominant in this country. Like if you go to the Western Cape and you go to Cape Town in particular, there's a lot of that kind of otherness. If you look at colored people, if you look at their attitudes as well, you can quickly determine that there are colored people and then there are other colored people. So there are coloreds and then there are other colors. And then there are other colors. In this country, such things are quite interesting.
In South Africa has a lot of this segregation.
That's it.
Everywhere. And there's also a lot of kind of identity and symbolism connected to this segregation.
That's it.
It's very important where I am, how I look, who I talk to,
and what language I talk. Those things are very problematic, but they also affect the way we convey knowledge, especially knowledge about art, the way we cultivate a sense of appreciation of art, to such an extent that many black people who can afford to collect art are simply not doing so because they don't even know what it means to collect art. And that is our big challenge because black people are a majority. We have many black people. And we get more and more black graduates and they get very good jobs and they get good salaries, even though that doesn't change our economic reality across the country. It's about individuals who are just getting those salaries. But they don't even collect art. They don't. But it's not because they can't afford to, but it's because, first of all, they were never educated. They never got art education. So they studied mathematics, biology, science, this and that, but not art. But art is such a lucrative business. It is a business. They don't even know that. It's a business. With small amounts of money, I try to collect art now and again. These works are part of my private collection. But many people would come in here and feel, wow, it's a waste of money. You spend money on this thing, this is just a drawing. So in this country, we are dealing with this, but I think we are running out of time because if we are now in 2023, but from 1994, nothing has really been done to change this situation. It's very difficult. So now we have very few people who can afford to collect art, very few people who are in fact interested in buying art. Whereas we've got many black people who could afford to buy art, but they just don't know that they should be collecting art. Because they don't know that one doesn't really buy art, but one just invests in art.
Yeah.
They don't know that.
No, and also there's the idea of point of many art collectors is also that that they have this interest also in collecting that art for the sake of collecting art.
Yeah.
Because they have a general interest in art, and then this collection will be passed on one day somewhere.
Yeah.
Or then you will sell some of it, and then not to actually profit, just to buy something else maybe.
Yeah.
So it's another way of, and I think that many of the people I imagine that you're talking about who can afford, they are corporate people.
Yes.
And the corporates. I mean, the middle class I meet in South Africa have kind of raised up in society, in the corporate world, and actually earn a lot of money.
Yeah, of course.
They are concerned with other things.
Oh yes,
because they just recently took that journey, and then it's important to kind of get things that is visible, valuable somehow. I think that, and art is down the road from that.
That's true.
Very far down the road.
That is true. Art is
so
still.
it will probably take many time, and there's a slight development in that direction. But this group of people in South Africa by art is very small.
No, it's very small.
I mean, for example, in September I went to Art Joburg, and you can see that it is a very small world.
Very
small.
There's
nowadays galleries which is run by black South Africans, and the audience in Art Joburg is also more black than it was 10 years ago, where it was only white people who came there. But of course it's a very slow and narrow development.
Although we see this slight change, it is mainly educated black people who actually pay attention to art. But people who have no formal education don't even bother looking at art.
Thinking that this will remain inside a very small circle, so it doesn't really have any consequence.
It doesn't.
In terms of what we're talking about.
It doesn't. It's not like in Europe. I'm just imagining Europe. I don't think that I know so much about Europe. But I think in Europe, even people who are not too highly educated, I think there is this general knowledge and appreciation of art. In Europe, I think things are very different in Europe, unlike in Africa. In Africa, we still have to go a very, very long distance in order to really see that something has been achieved. I mean, we have people here who are lawyers, black medical practitioners, black architects, so many black professionals. But most of them still don't collect art. It's only a tiny minority among those people that actually collect art. And it is very unfortunate, very, very unfortunate. Even when we want to do something as a public art museum, we often find that resources are very scarce, very limited. Ideas are there, but resources are quite limited.
So, and that is kind of a priority from the side of the government?
Unfortunately, in this country, we have a government that is now being run by black politicians, mainly black politicians. We have a few white people in opposition parties, which simply means they are not really running the government. But these black people, some of whom were in exile in Europe and elsewhere in the world, they still don't regard art as a priority. I just don't understand why. Because some of them are educated, and some of them were exposed to this culture of creating art when they were in exile. They were exposed to all those cultural aspects. But I just don't understand why, when they are back at home, they don't see the significance of truly supporting art. I cannot understand.
But maybe there's also that there could be something in the whole background of the struggle and also the construction of the ANC, because ANC is, of course, a very specific movement in a very specific place in the world where the conditions was very specific. But they also apply to a general kind of workers' union kind of idea, or a socialist kind of idea, which is based on the working class, who is somebody who is oppressed and visible oppressed, and it's about raising them in society. And for that movement also, if you look other parts of the world, art was never played a role. And in many places also education, especially academic education, didn't really play a role. What played a role was to kind of raise the wages and also the physical conditions of life. So there might be something in the history of the movement also that even though you have a lot of educated people, even though they have been exposed, then they might still have other kind of perspectives in life that do not comply to what you are asking.
That is true. But mainly that happens when it comes to visual art. But when it comes to other forms of art, like performing arts, like for example, music, poetry, theater, and all those, the support when it comes to those forms of art is much better.
It's much better than visual art.
Than visual art. I think it's because there's an element of entertainment, there's an element of pulling crowds into a space. But even art exhibition openings do pull crowds. But the problem is who goes to those art exhibitions. That is the main problem.
But I think you are right in terms of the music industry. Of course, it's very clear that this is part of entertainment and sort of business in a completely different kind of business in music.
Definitely.
And of course, theater, performing arts is somehow attached to music. It is not as commercial.
That's it.
But you can also. There's a lot of people who.
It is something that many people can easily understand and enjoy. Unlike in the case of visual art. Visual art is enjoyable to some degree, but it also needs to be unpacked so that it can be intellectually accessible to all the people.
Maybe you have the same kind of split inside literature somehow between prose and poetry. Because a lot of the South African literature who gets support is a lot of prose books who tells specific stories with a good plot about contemporary South African life. If I talk to South African poets, it's another story, because as everywhere else in the world, nobody wants to read poetry because it is complicated also. In the same way as the abstract painting on the wall.
It is very difficult. What I find interesting though is that the main form of art that people enjoy, especially in this country, is comedy. Comedy is not challenging, but comedy is quite enjoyable. It is a form of entertainment, and people want to laugh.
And have a good time, and it also it can also be combined with an evening out with some beers and
That's true.
fried meat or something.
That's true. Even though when you go to an art exhibition opening, you also get a glass of wine as well.
Exactly.
And you also socialize with other people who have attended that opening. So it is quite interesting. But if I can summarize this, I think that visual art has been regarded as a white cultural thing. And also because in this country, we were ruled by Afrikaners. And Afrikaners had a very different way of running this country. Even the education, the quality of education that was offered to us was very inferior. Everything was inferior. But if you look at other African countries which were colonized by the French and the Portuguese, this inferiority of education quality is not found at all. I find that people were properly educated.
Yeah, especially if you talk about the francophone world.
Yes.
Then it's very, because the French has always, and you also see the same if you go to France today.
Yes.
People will still read philosophy books in the subway.
That is true.
Which is not happening in very many other places in the world. So there is
True.
this very sense, and France is of course a very good example of how they used art as part of colonialism.
That's true.
There would be a cultural section everywhere, and
That's
they
true.
are still there promoting French art.
Yeah. Yes. Of course.
Very explicitly, actually.
Yeah.
And you can also see. I was in earlier this year. I was in Dakar in Senegal.
Oh yeah.
And it was very clear that here the French has been here, and there was this.
There's a footprint
of art. In a very different way than other places I have been. So
That's
I
true.
think there's this point
that is true.
That these systems has had consequences
That's true.
throughout the continent, which is interesting. But of course, it's also a bit depressing that you can see these colonial structures so clearly today still.
No, it's quite true. I mean, if you go to Zimbabwe, the kind of education that Mugabe promoted in Zimbabwe was very, very good. I mean, we get many good artists, visual artists from Zimbabwe, even today. The level, the quality of education was just very good. And I think that Mugabe was very wise in that he promoted skills. He wanted people to get skills as well, instead of just absorbing knowledge that one cannot apply. But there it's a different story, because they were also taught skills which many of them can apply and make a living. So unlike here, this country, there are no skills. But what is actually depressing is that even today we still have the same inferior education. It's even worse today.
You think it's worse?
It's worse today because the only thing that many kids get when they go to these so-called better schools, they only get accents, a certain English accent. But it doesn't help because they have no skills. They can only talk.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that, because that when I meet teenagers in South Africa, and then I talk to them about these schools, then I get really confused, because it's very exhausting. Because there's this very British idea of schooling, that it is very competitive, and it's about tests all the time. And I think your point about imposing knowledge is very important, because I can hear that they know a lot of things, but I can also see that I'm not sure
but
if they come from school or if they come from Wikipedia or from YouTube.
But they can't produce anything with their hands. They can't do plumbing, most of them. They can't paint the walls. They can't do bricklaying. They can't build a house. There are no skills. Yeah, so there is this white collar education, which doesn't help. I was so impressed one day. I met somebody who used to collect art of Vumikosi Zulu. There was a guy called Vumikosi Zulu in this country, but he died in 1996. I was actually doing research, looking at his work. I was still doing my master's at that point. I was very lucky that one of the key people who collected his art just came to where I used to work in Pietermaritzburg. That was a German priest. He had retired. He used to work in Swaziland. So he went back to Frankfurt, Germany. So he came back just to visit and do other things. But then when I talked to him, why are you back here? Because you are supposed to be retired and resting at home in Frankfurt. And he said to me, no, I've come back here because I have some work to do. And then he told me that I think he was building a house or painting or doing something, but it had something to do with skills that he got while he was at school. He was retired now, but he was still applying his skills and making a living. He's an old man, but he was capable of doing something with his hand. It is very different here from Germany. Germany is the powerhouse of Europe. That's what many people say. In Germany, people go to school, they learn this and that, but they also learn a trade. That's what they call it. They learn a trade after school before they go to any university. It's either plumbing or bricklaying or painting, anything, a trade that people can use to generate an income. But here in this country, such a thing doesn't happen. A school is very, very, very useless. Going to school in this country is very useless.
There's a lack of this focus on skills.
There's a lack of focus on
because
skills.
And you're thinking that this is actually unfortunate, because these skills can be used in different parts of your life.
To improve our economy as well. Because when we have so many people who are unemployed but who are graduates,
and then if they had a skill, they could go and do that instead.
They could be doing something. Yeah. For example, when I retire, I will go back to art. I will spend my time practicing my art and trying to exhibit and selling, because it's a skill. I was just fortunate that I just chose to study art, visual art, or fine art. But when I get enough time, when I'm no longer employed, I know that I will go back and practice my art and get a marketing agent and get a curator to do this and that for me. Somebody can do fundraising for me. If I can get funds, then I can just put my work on display and that's it. And I can keep on producing my art.
But I think actually maybe it's also this idea about that the skills has disappeared is also a broader development, because I know that for example in Denmark a lot of these areas where the skills was applied has now been industrialized, and it means that the skill has somehow disappeared.
I
have a friend from university. He has a big construction company today, and he says, well, I only employ people from Poland.
Really?
In Poland they still have a tradition for
in
skills,
Poland,
for skills, which is gone in Denmark. It's not because I want cheap labor, but they are simply better, and I've been using them for 20 years.
And they are capable, and they are...
Yeah, apparently that in some Eastern European countries has been less industrialized than some of the Western European countries has. So we have lost this kind of capacity also, and also because if you look at the way schooling has been developing in some European countries, then it has gone towards white collar, towards a more academicized way of thinking education.
It's very bad.
And this idea of having a skill has been a little bit downgraded or looked down upon. That this is if you can't get into university, then you need to do that. But nobody wants to. So there is this.
But they are falling into the same trap. Because we in this country we have this term, but many people are not aware of it, because many people don't look at these things. This term, Anglicization. People are anglicized. There is this belief that when you are well educated, You cannot touch the soil. You cannot do farming with your hands. And you cannot go and dig something and
because it is under
your level of education, your status, your social status.
Yeah.
So you can always employ someone. But that is a very unhealthy way of living.
Yeah, because then you don't have any knowledge about how things are actually done.
Yes, you don't know how things are done.
Where does things come from? They come from somewhere.
It is actually disempowering. It's like most of these urbanized people, especially black people. Most urbanized people look at country life as something that is very inferior, because there's no tap water there in most cases. There's no electricity, even though most of the country has now been electrified. But there are those rural areas where people still don't have electricity and water, running water. So they have to go somewhere and fetch some water and come back and cook and do this and that. So that kind of simple life is being looked down upon, but it is very safe. It is very safe to go and get water from a spring or from a well and come back with it and use it. It's very safe. The water that always runs in the pipes is not always safe.
Yeah, and I mean, in the urban spaces, people buy bottled water, which is also this is an artificial.
And they spend money. People don't have to always spend money in order to get water, because water is a natural resource. People should just go and fetch water without buying it. And people should just go and get some firewood without buying it and come back with it and make fire. People are becoming more and more artificial. They are becoming like plastic objects. They are no longer proper human beings. And the way, they even buy vegetables, unfortunately.
Instead of growing them.
We buy vegetables,
And actually, the interesting thing is that even in a lot of urban spaces, many people would have some kind of, maybe very small, but garden, and you would actually, with the weather in South Africa, would be able to grow a lot.
Definitely. It's better for people who have proper houses, who live in suburbs. It's even worse for people who live in apartments or flats.
Good.
They can't do anything. But those who live in townships can have a very, very small garden, even though those spaces are quite limited. But they can grow some vegetables there. So this kind of education in this country has been.
And you think that this is also connected to this split between art and craft somehow?
That's it.
But because I think I read somewhere that this art museum or this art gallery here where we are actually have had kind of a focus on that relationship, art and craft, for many years.
Yes, for many years.
Before apartheid ended, it was also there was this focus on merging the two.
That's true.
So I was thinking that what is this a kind of a strategy, or can we use this kind of
that is so true.
Instead of merging it, can this be used for kind of reinventing our knowledge or connection?
That is so true, because art administrators and managers of public art museums have always been aware of this problem, which has not been solved. But here at the Durban Art Gallery, there has been a culture of collecting craft, but also there has been an attempt to encourage people to look at craft as something that is almost at the same level as art. There is this interesting reality that we have in this country. Once a piece of craft has been collected and included in a public art collection, then it is seen as art, not craft anymore.
So then you maintain the separations also, because you're just moving an object into another space.
So, what happens is, when we collect a piece of craft and include it in our collection, somehow we indirectly obliterate this notion that it is craft. Automatically it is seen as art because it is displayed in the same exhibition space in the gallery.
And then you are stuck in the same corner, so to speak, because the craft who is outside there in a market somewhere or who has some use, it is still craft and not art.
It is still craft,
But if it gets here, then it's taken out of that daily life idea
true.
about being
that is
useful
true.
And having. So this idea of making it part of a collection does not really solve the problem.
No, it doesn't solve the problem for every crafts person. It doesn't, because any person who is producing craft out there is producing craft that has got no value as investment piece. It has no value. But when an acquisition committee of a public art museum looks at a certain piece of craft and says, this piece is worth collecting, and then they put forward reasons why it has to be collected, all of a sudden, that person who makes craft gets the same status as an artist.
Yeah.
So their work is now regarded as art.
So you mean in that way it plays a role to make it part of your collection, because then you kind of evaluate it in another way. This has influence in the craft production, because then the craft producers would also regard themselves as artists, and then we maybe slowly kind of merge these areas or make them the same.
But that also takes us to the question of power. There is power that is held by museums. When an art museum says this piece of craft is supposed to be collected and become part of our collection, then that particular crafts person is now regarded as an artist, no longer as a crafter. No one mentions craft anymore.
Then you also take the person away also, so to speak. So there's this dilemma.
And the person will start now creating craft not for
as an artist instead of
creating craft not for utilitarian purposes, but creating craft that is also seen as a piece of fine art. Because fine art is not utilized, but craft in most cases is utilized. Because in this country we have that separation. There is art there is craft that is utilized, and visual art is not utilized. So when this piece is brought here just for display and appreciation, it becomes a piece of fine art. But when it is found in a homestead where it is used as an object, then it is craft.
You will have some people who are making craft who then are objectified as artists, and there will be other people who are making this maybe similar kind of crafts, who are buyers and sellers somewhere in the market. So you have this separation of these things, making the same things, but in different sectors of the society.
That's it.
And it makes it, of course, very difficult because how are we going to, if we want to kind of merge the two in some ways, then the art also has to have some kind of, I don't know how this can be done, because what we want to do is to make art a more active agent in society.
What is really interesting here in this country is that if an academic happens to bump against you as a craftsperson, and that academic writes a seminar paper or something of that sort for presentation and even publication, then a lot of people will start recognizing this particular person as a person whose work can be collected for investment purposes. If no such an academic process has happened, then no one will know about that person. Because that person will just be like any other ordinary craftsperson in the market. And also that affects the value. Because a clay pot, which was regarded as craft, once that clay pot is in a public art museum, it is now regarded as a piece of art. And also the artist is now able to charge more for each and every pot that they will produce. Whereas before they were, if I can say, discovered by someone, they would charge similar amounts, small amounts of money just to survive. For example, there was a woman in Ishowe. Her name was Nestanala. Maybe you've heard about her. Nestanala was a very good potter. And her work, all of a sudden, was then collected by art museums, by public art museums. And then, all of a sudden, commercial art galleries became interested in her work as well. And then she was then put out there as a very good artist, not crafter. But her pots were really amazing. Her skill was very different. And there was another family up in Zululand called the Magwaza family. That Magwaza family also produced very beautiful pots, but not as beautiful as those by Nestanala, because Nestanala was very good, very, very good.
It seems that the narrative you are trying to describe now actually tells us that we cannot just regard art and craft and relationships between them as an isolated thing, because it's part of a broader kind of structure of power somehow, maybe, or of how we value things, and then it becomes a lot broader picture. So if you want to reinvent these skills and give them value, then we have to work on how we are valuing things in general.
We have to.
Speaking. And also how society works somehow, because this is what you're describing is that this is a reflection of a certain kind of society that cannot think about things as both equal and different.
That's it.
We cannot do both. Well, they have to be either the same or they have to be different. They can't be both somehow.
That's it. That's true.
And they should be able to be both, because they are both.
Yeah, they are both. Actually, they are both. One major challenge about this country is that thinking is not being taught as a skill, because to think takes a skill. People are taught what to think, but not how to think. That is the problem. That is why you find these tertiary institutions just producing many graduates every year, but these graduates don't know how to think. They only know what to think, but not how to think.
I know a teenager in East London, and she so often tells me about school, and then she also has these debating classes. And that is also always a mystery for me, because how can debating an argument be a competition, so to speak?
Yeah, that's true.
Sorry. And then I'm trying to discuss different things with her, and what she actually likes is to win the argument, because she's trained in terms of winning an argument. But it's not necessarily about, it's not really a conversation, because what we discuss is not important. It is kind of the end that's important. So it's kind of it's like a comedy night maybe, or it's like a football game where there's specific rules to how the outcome can be. But what we are interested in when we think about knowledge and also when we think about art is actually what goes on the journey.
That's
not
it.
where it ends, so to speak.
You know, such debate sessions are very, I would say, to me, they look a bit useless as long as they are not going to be productive, as long as they don't encourage people to act differently, so that they can be more productive in their society, so that they can make a meaningful contribution towards improving the quality of life in society. So those are just for display purposes, just to display how good I am in arguing my points and this and that. But it ends there. It stops there. It doesn't help anyone. And that for me is a sign of lack of proper thinking. Yeah, people can argue, so what?
Yeah, and it's also kind of a very superficial way of dealing with knowledge. Who goes back to this kind of your idea about the urban population as kind of living a plastic life.
Yeah, very.
And this competitiveness around knowledge is also an reflection of that, I think.
It is.
Being a little bit, we live this kind of shallow life where we lack some kind of grounding in what we're doing or some kind of reasoning, or we also lack maybe an idea about where we are going. We are not really going anywhere.
It is. I mean, for me, this approach to education, when I try to imagine, because I didn't live long ago, but I live only now. But when I try to imagine how knowledge was acquired in ancient Africa, I think it was very different. I think it was always knowledge that could be applied. It was always knowledge that was authentic, that was really meant to empower the people. It was not just knowledge that we see today, that we acquire today.
But the knowledge you're talking about was based on an experience and also on kind of someone having experience and telling you about that, or showing you, I think, that experience.
That kind of knowledge which was
in a daily life.
That's it. That knowledge was very powerful, because it was knowledge that people were acutely aware of. They knew that our forefathers passed this knowledge down to us, and they thought, okay, we must make sure we teach our kids, we teach our children, so that they too can pass it on to their own children. That kind of knowledge was good, because I mean that is how people survived in their environment. But also I tend to go as far back as the time in Egypt, the time of Imhotep. Because Imhotep was a very interesting African genius, because he knew so many things. He knew medicine, he also knew like maths, geometry, all those things. So many things that he knew. And he was interested in teaching the people, including the Greeks who actually came all the way to Egypt to learn about the knowledge, to absorb knowledge that was there in Egypt. That knowledge was applicable, because now we see pyramids. Somebody was able to apply, because I mean I am convinced that those pyramids were built on specific energy points in Egypt. And that knowledge is very important, because it was like, it showed how people were connected to the world outside this planet, to the space outside the planet. It was very, very, useful. People could apply it, and people were taught how to organize the army for practical purposes like protecting the country. Those skills were learned by people who lived at that time. But now, we don't know what we are learning.
We have kind of pulled away from that. Yeah.
We have.
I think that this is maybe also a good way of concluding this, because this actually it deals somehow also with this idea of crafting, because craft is what's left of that kind of knowledge is how craft has been. This has been embedded in this kind of this idea of experience and passing on and passing it on from one person to another.
What you're saying is quite true. In conclusion, we still have to deal with it. I mean, we cannot pretend that this divide between art and craft no longer exists. We can't. But now our challenge is that we don't know where to start. We don't know where to start. But what we are doing as the Durban Art Gallery is we run art workshops, and we don't try to change what people are doing, but we try to encourage them to improve the quality of whatever they are doing, so that they can actually regard visual art as part of their culture. Because many people believe that art is like a white culture. But then if we go to townships and other rural areas, if we go there and say, okay, we are running a workshop and people get some skills, and then we select the best work out of that workshop, and then we exhibit that work. But in order to make people understand that visual art is part of their culture, whether it includes craft within it, well, it doesn't matter. But we make sure that a local leader in that particular area will come and open those exhibitions. Not in English, but in isiZulu, if there are people who speak isiZulu there. Okay, when we go to areas that are occupied mostly by Indian people, then it will be English. So that people can now start accepting visual art and craft within it as part of their culture, daily life. That's what I can say.
Yeah, that is a good way of ending it. Thank you very much for.
Thank you for having me on your wonderful program.
You have listened to a bonus track by Foreigners and Friendship. If you have built up an appetite for more, then you can follow us on thewhiteafricanblogspot.com and walk in our footsteps by stepping into In My Footstep WordPress.com. We broadcast new episodes of our radio show every first Tuesday of the month, available on your preferred platforms.